What's up, everybody? My name's Indy, and that guy way over there, that's Jay, and in the middle we got Gunnar, Clovis.
Hi.
Hey there. And we're going to talk about accessibility in games today. That's going to be one of the things. Did you guys see that article I just linked you from
Yes.
GameIndustry.biz? It just popped in my email just a second ago. People of the year
Probably because
2018.
they knew we were going live.
That's what it is. I mean, they searched the internet and knew we were going live. Oh, before we get going, I want to click this button right there. And look at that. Boom! 7 months in a row sub.
Oh, thank you, Indy. You were so kind to us.
That's 7 months in a row.
This is where we plug. If you have a Amazon Prime subscription, we will absolutely be happy to take your free sub.
Yeah, and you can
have a problem with it at all.
You get the I love indie games emote, which is pretty badass right here.
That is true. And
That
you know,
one right
down
there.
the line, we have very cool things planned for subscribers as we're expanding the show into our, blossoming media empire. But yeah, right now you get a really cool icon. That's wonderful in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got Gunnar. Gunnar is going to be talking about accessibility in games, which is a subject that is near and dear to my heart. The Powell Group has sponsored the last two gaming accessibility conferences at GDC because it's just something that we believe in, and we think everyone should be able to play games. But before we jump into that, there was a minor piece of news, Indy, and I'm assuming you saw it yesterday, and Gunnar as well.
It wasn't very epic, was
Just
it?
No, it wasn't epic at all. So Valve has been the go-to, the number one for years, and we can actually credit them with starting the digital distribution, world that we have now. But at the same time, they've been kind of, I don't know if fat and happy is the words we want to use, but sitting on their laurels. Their model hasn't changed that much. And then a week ago, they kindly said, we're going to lower our rates if you sell $10 million worth of your game. And then we'll lower it again if you sell 50 million copies. $50 million worth of your game.
And then bam.
Yeah, well, I mean, that right there, and I told a friend of mine, I told Larry this morning, actually, I said that was a plea to about 10 companies, your Activisions, your Blizzards, your Epics, that have Ubisoft, who have gone and said, you know what, we don't want to give Valve 30%, we're going to make our own launcher. So in trying to appease and pull 10 companies maybe back into the fold, they basically just kicked thousands of developers in the teeth. I mean, indie developers especially. And so there was a lot of grumbling over that. But then yesterday, our friends at Epic just basically said, yeah, we're going to do our own store. And it's not something that was that unshocking to us. I mean, we've talked about this in the past with the number of users that they have on Android and PC. There are 200 million users playing Fortnite right now. And they have the capacity to start doing this. And Tim has been preaching about the evils of 30% for months, if not years. And so actually it was a year and a half ago at the Gamescom in Germany that he gave the keynote and said, this is ridiculous. And so it's not a shock for anybody that they came out, but they said, yeah, you're going to take 12%. That's it. And if you are using Unreal, we'll actually take our licensing fee out of that 12%, so it doesn't ever go up. And
They're also doing a thing where they will help pay for influencers, like 5% or something? For influencers.
They subsidize the first 24 months for this influencer program. But yeah, I do want to harp in on that. Because I am an indie developer, and I come from a low-level software engineering background, like building my own engine. So I'm very platform engine agnostic. But I do actually prefer Unreal out of the major engines because it uses C++. But that 5% cut was very prohibitive. When really if you're not making an FPS, like a really intensive game, Unity can pretty much accomplish the same things. But having Unreal subsidize that 5% of the engine fee inside the 12% is huge. And that's actually, I was just talking to Larry about that yesterday as well. That actually is very persuasive to me personally, and I know a lot of people.
It's going to be big. And so they're supposed to have more announcements tomorrow night at the Game Awards. It's going to be very curated to start with, which is good for developers as well, because you don't have as much competition. The other thing is they're going to expand it into Android games. And so that's going to bring, I think the technical word is shit tons. Is that a good word? Of eyeballs.
A buttload.
Yeah, a buttload, somewhere between a buttload and a shit ton of developers into that store as well. So, this is big. I don't think Valve is going to change anything in the near future because, quite frankly, they've seen people, do other stores for years and never crack a dent in them. But, this is going to change a lot of stuff in the industry in the next, 6, 12, 18 months.
Yeah, the combination of the Epic Store and with Discord Nitro, I think, are going to be the two biggest kind of opposing forces to Steam. I'm interested to see how it goes. And
Discord is doing some cool stuff. I'm actually entered into a tournament for the game Minion Masters, which is free on Discord. This tournament is sponsored by Discord, and you have to be a Discord. Oh, I met you at the Woo It Party. Nice. You have to be a Discord partner and to enter it. And let's see, it's like $18,000 plus. They're doing things on Discord, like if you have the game. Actually, is it tomorrow? It's either today or tomorrow. You get all of the main champions for free to try out, and you can only do it on Discord. So that's kind of cool. That's kind of a neat thing. So Discord's doing a lot of stuff to boost their store. Plus, if you're a Turbo user on Discord, you get there's a bunch of games that you get for free, which is amazing.
Yeah, I thought it was cool that they gave us free games like through the end of 2019 or something like that.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, big news on the digital distribution side. We'll see how all of this plays out over the next few months. But, especially for the indie devs out there, this is a wonderful thing for you. Epic is really put their foot down and said, we're in the corner. So, all right, let's get this. Gunnar, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Let's start off with the easy stuff. Tell us how you got into the industry and a little bit about your background and your career.
Yeah, so my career is pretty fresh because I'm very young, but I've been involved in games and game development for pretty much, most of my life, arguably 10 years, depends on how you define it. I want to do this at a very young age. I've been making card games, board games forever, but I really got my start in modding for Portal 2. I have a lot of people in that community that I still know to this day, a lot of great people. I taught myself how to program. I grew up very poor, so I lied about where I lived to the government so we changed school districts, and then I got a waiver on top of that to go to this very specific high school just because the only one that had a computer science wing and game development. Taught myself engineering there because the classes didn't do anything. But it's very involved. I actually ended up teaching game development computer science, and we had a huge event for it. I went to the University DigiPen Institute of Technology, which is a very silly name that most of the students hate. But if you don't know that school, it was the first university in the world to offer a degree in game development or real-time interactive simulation, as they call it, founded by a former chairman of Nintendo Software Technologies called Gunnar. Still the best school in the world for game development, in my opinion. Use average graduate salary and industry awards as a metric, which is what I do. I was there only for about a year and a half. I ended up dropping out for a variety of reasons, but actually after my freshman year, I had been waived into a senior and master's level classes because I gave up opportunities to pursue it Harvard and Yale to go to this video game school because I love video games and I've always wanted to develop for them. And so I left the university and was working at a couple jobs in Seattle with startups with Microsoft people because everyone in Seattle either works for Microsoft or used to work for Microsoft. Every single person in that city. One of them was actually doing a private space project where I developed in Unity this VR kind of demo, and I worked on these engineering white papers. And the other studio was a mid-core game development studio with some former Microsoft people, or current Microsoft people. And then I had to move to Vegas about a year ago, and the industry in Vegas is pretty sparse. So for video games, it's very obviously for casino development, it's huge, which is unfortunately what I've had to get into, which I swore I wouldn't do, but now I am become deaf. It's where the money is. I still am making video games with my own company called Some Guy, which is a self-deprecating thing, but also allows me to make a little bunch of math jokes. SUM guy. So I'm developing casino products. That's actually, I haven't slept a minute in like the last 20 hours because I've been shipping casino stuff. But I'm the vice chair of the board of directors for the IGDA Las Vegas, organizing that. But I got into the industry very specifically with Valve, actually, because of Portal. When I was very young, played it in 2007, became obsessed with it. And I just always wanted to work for Valve, which is interesting because I actually, just today, December 5th, we're having Valve, they just flew in last night. They're speaking at the IGDA Las Vegas event that I'm organizing. And then I'm going to have dinner with Tom Giordino, the head of Steam, later tonight.
Tom is good, people.
Yeah, yeah. So interesting there. So I'm now just kind of trying to help organize and grow the Las Vegas game development community, which is very small. I'm hosting the first global game jam site that Vegas has ever seen. It's probably going to be like the biggest developer event in the history of Vegas, just because that's a really low bar. If we just have like 60 people making games for 2 days, then we've shattered all ceilings, which I think will definitely hit.
So tell us a little bit about, what gaming accessibility is and how did you become interested in it?
Yeah, so game accessibility is essentially, it's just accessibility for games. If you know what accessibility is in other industries like film and literature, it's the exact same thing, just for our medium. It's just allowing people with different disabilities and impairments to play your titles very comfortably and happily, and broadening your audience in that way. And so it's a very moral thing to do. If you don't want to kind of disallow people that have certain disabilities, which basically everyone does. Everyone pretty much has or later will develop some form of disability, like 100% of people. And it can vary, but it's a lot more common than people really give it credit for. Like 1 in 5 people, myself among them, are dyslexic. Like 1 in 68 or less people are autistic. 1 in 12 men are colorblind, and there are a lot of games still that don't consider their colorblind users, and that really limits your audience. Because it's 1 in 12 men, 1 in 400 women, but it's not that uncommon.
That's interesting. That men are that much more colorblind than women are.
Yeah, there are a lot of it's XY chromosome thing. It's genetics,
science, genetics,
science, genetics, blah blah blah. But 1 in 9 people have ADHD. It's just very common.
Yeah, it is. And so one of the things, and I opened my eyes up to it much more when we started working with the Gaming Accessibility Conference, but it has always been one of those things in the back of my mind. But a lot of developers, it's not a priority for them because they're like, well, I don't know how many people with disabilities are actually playing my game anyway. And one of the best examples that I heard, that really made everything stick with me actually came from one of the YouTube videos my son was watching on Zelda. And if you play Breath of the Wild, there's a couple of those shrines where you have to use the Switch as like a balance board and tilt it to make a ball go into a hole, like those little maze puzzles we all had when we were a kid. And the guy went on like a 15-minute rant about how he hated this level, because when it had to have been one of the ones for the Switch came out, he had broken his arm. So we're not talking about a lifelong disability, but he had simply broken his arm and he could not play that level because he couldn't hold the Switch like that. And it's one of those things that makes you think this isn't just, a small section of the gaming community. This can be a lot of people.
Yeah, no, it's if you look at any one disability, often you'll see, oh, okay, that's not that many people, but altogether, it's the majority of people, truly. If you have a very broad definition and consider things like ADHD along with those things, which can impact, you can design games that better fit people have an impairment more like ADHD compared to an amputee or a paraplegic. And this is what I talked about. I just delivered a talk for the IGD Las Vegas last month on game accessibility, and I did it again last week at the UNLV. Those will be up on YouTube.
Well, I think and you sent us the show, and I'll find this while we're talking. But so, what are some good examples of accessibility options in games that are currently on the market?
Well, there are just so many. A lot of it is the really good features are. Yeah, so I'll go off. I'll answer this question kind of roundaboutly if you don't mind. So in the real world, there are things called curb cuts, which everyone's familiar with, even if you don't know the word. It's just on the street corner. There's little divots that go in, leading from the sidewalk into the road. Those were designed for the disabled. They're specifically designed for people in wheelchairs, so they didn't have to have their wheelchairs lifted up and off the sidewalk. But immediately upon installation, we all found that curb cuts benefited everyone. Any parent with a stroller, not just people in wheelchairs, any bicyclists, cyclist, skateboarder, delivery person with a cart, anything like that. It's ubiquitous and so helpful to everyone that it became normal. We forget they were implemented originally as accessibility options. Same thing is true with captions in film. And so a lot of those same options apply to the game industry. We call that the curb cut effect, about how an accessibility feature actually ends up benefiting everyone. So there's just so many basic things that are taken for granted and should. That's a bad phrase, but they should be expected. For example, just adjusting the field of view in a 3D game. That's mainly to allow people that get motion sickness from playing these 3D games. If you have the field of view too small, especially, it will make a lot of people very physically sick. And so you have to allow these options to adjust it, and that's just considered normal. Same thing with captions. Captions are generally considered normal. In AAA stuff, features to disable blood and gore, that's considered normal. And those are all accessibility options. If we want to get to a more specific example, Celeste, which came out this year, it's still 2018. Very early this year, Celeste came out, which is a wonderful indie game. And that had something really, I know revolutionary feels like too strong of a word, but something pretty unique called the assist mode, which allowed people to very custom tailor the difficulty. Because it's a very hard platform game. So you can adjust the game speed, you can give yourself infinite dashes, which is a main mechanic in the game. You can make spikes not hurt you. You do all these different things to make the game easier, very specific to your likes and preferences. And that makes the game just so much more playable for everyone. And one of my favorite things is, I forget his name, but there's this blind game, and he did a great series with Celeste. And that's one of my personal models. If you can get a blind person to effectively play your video game when you're doing a lot of things really, really right. And interesting enough, just a month or two after Celeste came out to critical success, a lot of praise for this assist mode and the accessibility features and huge sales. Super Mario Odyssey came out for the Switch with Nintendo. And that had a feature also called assist mode, which did a very similar thing and hugely impactful to millions on millions of people and very lauded. Blizzard is generally pretty good at this for the most part. Overwatch has really good accessibility features. And again, a lot of it we don't necessarily think of it as accessibility features, like changing your crosshair. It's just options like that. The more options you can generally provide, always the better. Because you might think colorblind options. Okay, those just benefit colorblind people. Yeah, well, that's generally true, but normally the architecture that you're going to make to implement those options are beneficial to everyone. And even still, like, I believe it was Call of Duty versus Battlefield, I want to say. I might be getting it mixed up, but with Call of Duty had like a red and blue, or actually it might have been Gears of War. All the shooters. There's so many shooters. I'm sorry.
It's one of those dang shooters. Yeah.
Yeah, one of those shooters. And some of them had blue and red as the team colors. And a lot of types of colorblindness made that impossible to distinct. Whereas another version had blue and orange, and so they could actually tell it apart. And that was like the deciding factor in the sales for a lot of people. And so, yeah, it's game accessibility benefits those people with disabilities, but it does generally benefit everyone.
Well, for me personally, the crosshair situation, I have bad eyes, right? And so a lot of stuff I can't see things that well when they move fast, and so having like a big crosshair, and I even make my mouse as big as it can possibly be, you know what I mean? Because it just helps me, even though I'm right in front of my computer screen. So what are like some basic things that developers can do to create accessibility in their games?
Well, again, just a lot of what you're going to see. I would say one of the most impactful and basic is just having remappable controls. And this is pretty much expected on PC. If you release a game in 2018, don't have remappable controls on PC, you are going to get dragged through the gutter, the barbed wire, whatever the term phrase is. And I think it's honestly deserved, because implementing remappable controls is not difficult. It's really not. And it's so impactful for so many people, because, again, a lot of these will allow even people that don't have these disabilities to benefit by customizing it, by often fixing problems that you made in the design stage, which is no one wants to think they do that, but everyone does. It can always be better for somebody. And so allowing people to tailor controls is a huge deal. And so that's common on PC, but it's very rarely seen on console, fortunately. And that's why that link you just posted about the People of the Year 2018, the Xbox Adaptive Controller. That's great. Like the Xbox Adaptive Controller is fantastic. Xbox and Microsoft have done really great work in accessibility. On the Xbox One, you can, on the console level, remap any of the buttons to any of the other buttons. So you can rebind the controls on your console controller for the system. And that's great for what Microsoft is doing, but as a developer, you do not want to rely on it. Because it's just a huge, huge pain in, you guys were cursing earlier, so it's a huge pain in everyone's ass, because you have to change those Microsoft, those Xbox One controller settings for each game. And if you had a game like Overwatch, which has multiple heroes, multiple different control schemes, it doesn't work. Like, you'd have to just play one character and then go back to the Microsoft settings and finagle with that, which is not intuitive. And so they're making the adaptive controller, which is, again, helping do this. But it's not something you want to rely on as a developer. You should be implementing these at the level of your game, because it's honestly easier. It's not difficult. Like, if you're in any modern engine, that is insanely trivial. Like, should be far less than a day's work. If you design it from the outset, it's just baked in and not even a thing. If it is difficult for you to implement remappable controls in your game, then that means your game is a mess of spaghetti code, and implementing these mappable controls would be good for you anyway, because you'd be fixing the code, which you should have done regardless.
One of my favorite little ideas, and this came from my friend Tara Volker who's now at Microsoft, but was at Turtle Rock for a while, and she gave a talk about how they went back and retroactively changed the icons, the prey icons and the team icons in what was it? Evolve? Was that their name? I can't remember. Yeah, they went and changed that to make it more accessible for people with color blindness. And when they did, they found out that the majority of their player base actually switched over to those, options, because they made the game easier and more enjoyable. So
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There are a lot of those kind of stories where someone implements this accessibility feature. They think, only like 2% of people use it, and 70% of the people end up using it. It fixes some part of the game and allows just customization. Customization is always good. So game accessibility is really a UI UX problem, which is why I'm so interested in it, because I love UI and UX, and I love I really like helping people and facilitating other people be happy. That's very important to me, and accessibility impacts me very personally as well, because I have a ton of problems. But there're just so many basic things, like just honestly just making better UI and allowing UX elements to be resizable in the menus.
Oh, I love that. Scalable UI, love it.
Yeah, huge deal. Although that can be kind of complicated, but most accessibility implementations are actually really easy and cheap if you do them at the beginning of a project. If you hold them off until the very end, then it can be a huge problem. Like, for example, having captions, which is a problem in the games industry, because we don't have yet a fully agreed upon standard for any accessibility feature, including captions and subtitles. Unlike film, whereas film has for decades this very, very set in stone how you're supposed to caption these, and for each age group, and how you're going to do, what are the words per minute, what's the text box size, all that kind of stuff. We don't have that, so every studio just makes it up. And so there are just so many examples of people that just rage against the horrible captions in such and such game, because you can't control them. They're just terrible. They're super small. They just put a whole huge block of text on the screen, and you're supposed to read it all. No. So if you just copy film is my advice there. But yeah, having fonts, the font and the color, the like transparent text box, having all be adjustable in the options menu of the game is incredible. But making the font size adjustable for captions is really hard if you do it at the end. If you do it at the beginning, it's no problem. But there are a lot of horror stories about people that try and shove it in at the end of a project because they didn't think through for it, and it costs so much money
But quite frankly, we see the very same thing with localization, basic testing that should have been going. I mean, we are an industry that tends to be bad, not completely, but in general, about planning from the beginning. There's a lot of push to, get a game out there and get it seen so you can adapt it and you can iterate on things. But that's good. But at the same time, you need to start planning for some of this stuff very early on, so you aren't, at the end of your development cycle and go, oh crap, people.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, but kind of twist it, because you're saying it's an issue that they're getting it out. They're rushing to get it out so early. I would just say you want to get it out earlier, because the biggest solution to these kind of problems, as with pretty much any UX problem, any game design problem, is just playtesting. And you just want to have your game, and especially if this is true for indies, because indies don't do this pretty much all the time. My advice is just copy Valve's playtesting scheme. They're really good at playtesting, or were. They make games anymore, whatever that is. But just get your game in front of as many people as possible, as early as possible. That's how you figure out all these problems. If you just,
that's what I was getting at. You do need to get it out there in front of people, but you can't skip over some of this basic stuff before you do that. And that's what we see a lot of companies doing. Because I mean, Stephanie was on a few months ago talking about the localization side, And, she told me, and it's just stuck with me for years. I said, when do we need to start looking at localization? She goes, when you start making a game. When your first text is written, you need to have a plan for localization. And the same is true for accessibility. You have to have a plan for this stuff from the beginning, or it's just going to be harder to do later.
Yeah. And so I, in my opinion, my view, I don't see companies as trying to get things out super quickly. But I feel like they want to make the appearance of that, but they have the beta testing that the full game. It's very advanced beta. Like, for example, the Fallout 76 beta, which we were just talking about before the stream. They did not change like anything from the beta. Like, they don't. It's just a way for them to. You have to pre-order the game. You have to pre-order the special edition of the game to get access to the beta. It's a marketing tool. They're not actually looking for playtesting. These pushing for quick things. That's not true. In the indie community, it's more important because indies tend to be more transparent which they should. All of gaming should be more transparent. Like, big companies are very afraid of showing a game that's actually early in production, which is understandable. Like, for E3 2018, Bethesda shows 5 seconds of a Elder Scrolls 6 trailer, everyone freaks out. That's not anything. They're not actually showing anything, and they never will. It's not what they do. But you should. You should show your game as early as possible to as many people as possible. And that's how you figure out these accessibility features. Because people will tell you. They will tell you right away. And then you realize, I had not planned for all these different things.
Yeah, I thought the simple fact that they were running a beta for like 2 weeks right before the game starts, I was like, and then you find out that it wasn't even a continuous beta. It was like, okay, you can play for 6 hours on Saturday, and that's like, you
had to pre-order it. It's a marketing tool. It's not an actual beta. It's a lie.
So Tyler and you says, sorry if this has been addressed, I'm a bit late, but is there a good source of accessibility guidelines to refer to early in development? There are so many accessibility problems to consider in so many ways they can affect your game's design.
Yes, and so you've already been sharing this. I don't know if the Twitch channel, I'm not seeing what's happening there. If you just Google game accessibility guidelines, the first result will be gameaccessibilityguidelines.com, which is the main resource I use for giving my talk. A lot of it was from my own experience and from Level Access, which also has some great resources. But Game Accessibility Guidelines is trying to be that standard for the industry. I really hope they succeed. I really want them to be. They just have I actually have them open right now. And so they break it up into motor, cognitive, speech, hearing, and vision. Is all in general too. So these different sectors of how to design for accessibility, and then it's on a 3-tier system, which is very common. Again, there's not an agreed upon metric, but pretty much everything uses kind of a variant of this 3-tiered system, funnily enough. And so if you just look through that, honestly, just read the whole page, like Game Accessibility Guidelines full list, just read it all. It takes 10 minutes to read the entire thing. It's super, super helpful. Click on any of them, opens it up. Normally, normally they have examples at the bottom too. So they'll show a specific game that did this thing well, or sometimes did this thing really badly. My favorite example of doing things badly is the Super Smash Bros. 4 for Wii U. That menu is the worst menu in all of humankind, and I think it's a great study for just how not to do UX, because everyone hates that menu. I've watched so many articles, video essays, and read so many articles about why that menu is terrible. And it's really just a UX problem, because you want people to be able to play your game. But if someone can't play your game, then they're not going to play your game. They're not going to buy games from your studio. And then you lose that sale. And just doing these accessibility features, it's not wasted development time, because you're broadening your audience, which is the most important thing you can really do in business, right? But also it benefits everyone from the curb cut effect, which is
So the IGDA actually has a gaming accessibility special interest group.
Yes, they do.
And so there's a link to that as well, Tyler and you. And then there are a few others that are out there. Here's a very easy, the article is like a year old. Excuse me. But it's still good, and it's got a lot of good links in it that you can go to and check it out.
Pigpen, thank you for the follow. Woo! Pigpen Gaming.
So yeah, all right. So sorry, I get distracted easily.
No worries.
So, as we go forward, I mean, it really can't be said how important that adaptive controller was to come from Microsoft, because I don't believe we've ever had anything in the industry along the lines of that. And if you haven't seen it, and if you aren't familiar with it, I posted a link up earlier to like the most heartwarming holiday commercial that I've seen in a very long while, with a lot of kids going over to their friend's house because he got the adaptive controller. How do you think this is going to change things from here out, Gunnar? I mean, are we going to see more controllers come out like this? Are we going to see a lot more of the AAA companies get on the bandwagon here and start to take this seriously, or where do you think it goes from here?
That's a tough call. Obviously the ideal is for everyone to go on the bandwagon, but I'm not sure if I would jump to that prediction with a lot of confidence. Because it's I see I want to watch that ad now. It's wonderful, but how much money is it really going to bring in? I think the most interesting part of it is like the title of that article you shared, People of the Year 2018. And that, I think, is kind of the most immediately impactful concept, especially to indie devs, is doing accessible games gets you a lot of attention. It gets you a lot of positive press and awards. Another great example is Naughty Dog, one of my favorite studios in the world. Uncharted, they've always had great accessibility features in that game, where they have like all these different settings for assisting camera and driving and lock on aim and doing there's a lot of different stuff. I believe and also the Spider-Man PS4 game, which it should be commonplace. They have options to mitigate like repeated button presses, which a lot of people that have motor disorders, like I have carpal tunnel. It's not so much an issue for me because it just makes my hand numb, but a lot of people have trouble mashing a button for stupid QuickTime events or even holding the button down. And so giving options to change that is really impactful.
See, I didn't even realize that, but I mean, my takeaway from playing Spider-Man, and I'm about, I think maybe half the way through it, is it's not nearly as combo centric as it may seem like. There's a lot of things you can do in that game, and there's a lot of the little abilities that you unlock that I'm like, oh my god, it's like I'm playing Street Fighter, but it's really not that bad. And so I mean, it is, you're right, it's one of those things that you can tell they took into account early on. And it's Insomniac, isn't it? Not Naughty Dog. Insomniac made that game, I think.
Yeah.
I'm going to stick up for them because they're here in North Carolina, or at least they have an office here in North Carolina. So I'm going to defend them. But it is obvious that they had this going through their head, and they were thinking about this as they did it, because there are so many abilities in there that it's hard to keep track of them all, and you don't have to remember 1,400 different combos to be able to pull stuff off.
Yeah, I'm pulling up a link. I don't know how channels to share with you, and then you can skip stuff. There is a YouTube channel called Mark Brown you're not aware, is pretty much the best game design channel, and he has a series regarding designing for disability, and he actually talks about that Spider-Man example along with everything. Really, really great resource there.
Go ahead, and did you post that up in chat?
I just did on Discord. I don't know how to do it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Hold on. I'll fire it over there. So, to the world at large who's listening and watching out there right now, I mean, if you've got any questions on gaming accessibility, let us know. Fire them out there. I just posted the YouTube link to Mark's page, and then the link that Gunnar was talking about a little while ago.
Yeah,
and, the award. We're not going to say you need to do accessibility guidelines so you can get press and sell more games. That's not why you should do them. But that reality is, especially for indie teams, any niche you can find your way in, and very accessible games are a niche right now. You do stand to put yourself out a little ahead of everybody else. And so Games Industry Biz, has an article that People of the Year 2018, and they credit the entire, Xbox adaptive controller team for it, for doing what they've done and bringing more people to games.
Mm-hmm.
It's an
awesome. I just posted the link to my talk that I gave at the for the Las Vegas. So the thing happened there. I gave that talk after a very stressful evening, and then the venue lost the footage. They lost all the data for it, which we were all just livid about. But fortunately, one of the attendees essentially just took a home video recording of it because he's making a gaming documentary he wants to feature me in. And so he just has this kind of shaky cam of the whole talk. It's not great AV quality because he didn't have access to like the mic that I was on, and it's he's in the audience doing this, and he had some camera problems, and so there's like a bad flicker effect. Not good AV quality, but the content is there, and I go through a lot of very actionable implementation details for that. That's basically 60% of the talk is just specific things you can do.
Yes, and the video starts out with our good friend Larry, up front.
Yeah.
Talking about
that's all the footage we have. Yeah, I love it. The only person I spend more time with than Larry is my partner. Like, Larry and I sometimes have dinner like twice. It's too much.
All right, so in terms of final thoughts, in anything that you want to emphasize, get out there, for the show today. I mean, anything else that's on your mind?
I mean, I covered all the major points I wanted to. I can go into more detail for anything. But one of the things I said in the talk, which is it's just one of my favorite phrases in life, is that it's hard to look beyond your own experience. That you can only perceive your own perceptions. It's impossible for you to know what it's like to be anyone else. I grew up a lot around amputees, and so that kind of ingrained very soft spot in my heart at a young age. But if you're not exposed to people with these different impairments than you, then you just won't really comprehend it. So you just have to talk to people. You have to play test your games as much as possible, as early as possible. But I really love going to gaming conventions, usually as an exhibitor. I never go as an attendee. And talking to people about their experiences. And I talk about in the talk that like I never understood the need for mono tracked audio.
I didn't either. That's a new one to me too.
It made no sense to me. And like, why not just is everything not stereo or surround sound? But no, if you have if you only hear out of one ear, you can't localize sound, then having a stereo game can actually be unplayable to you because you can't tell where the shots are coming from or whatever it is. You just switch it to mono and it's instantly fixed. And that's so interesting. Another one I give example of the talk. I went to GE2, which is different than G2E, both of which are are conventions I went. It's very confusing. And I talked to this young woman and her husband, and she had these very long kind of stick-on, I guess, painted fingernails. I don't really get it as a fashion thing. It's not for me. But I don't have a problem with it. But because I just don't have exposure to that, I don't really have an interest in that kind of thing. I never considered how that impacts your usage of a smart screen, and that you have these long fingernails. She's talking about that stops her from playing all these touchscreens. Like, oh my god, that's such a big deal, because that's like not an uncommon thing, really. Like that's a large percentage of the population does that kind of thing as a fashion deal. And if you design your mobile game with these kind of very complex swiping movements, they just might not be able to play it. And that's a general theme, is you just want your controls to be as simple as possible. That's just good design in general. If you don't, again, I would recommend Mark Brown. He has a really great thing about the Mario and how his jump, like it's one action, but it does all these different things. Nintendo's a great source. Nintendo has pretty much always been at the forefront of game accessibility, except when they're really not, because they love forcing motion control, and that's very anti-accessibility. You don't want to force a certain control scheme on anyone, especially motion controls. It's the worst thing to force on anyone. But besides for that, Nintendo's usually really, really good.
So it's funny that you mentioned you have to be able to look outside your own experience, because there was a comic that I saw yesterday from one of my favorite writers, a guy named Gavin, who does a whole comic called Zen Pencils, where he takes inspirational quotes and turns them into full strip cartoons. And this one was called "Travel is Fatal to Prejudice, Bigotry, and Narrow-Mindedness," and it is it's mainly talking about racism and things like that, but it's a very true message for for situations like this too. It's not that you're not necessarily racist, but you don't know what you don't know, and so when you get out, and whether you're talking to people who experience life different than you, or people who live somewhere else, it's a good thing for growing overall and improving your game. That's why when I talk to high schools or colleges, and they said, what do I need to do to get into the game industry? And I'm like, it's not, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you have to go to a bunch of specialized classes and colleges and all this sort of good stuff, because in our industry, portfolio matters, but you need to be out there, especially if you want to be a producer or a designer, playing as many games as you can and getting out of your comfort zone, because that's what happens. You get in, whether it's the UI, the UX side, or the game design side, or the accessibility side, or all of it together, we tend to get into a bit of tunnel vision based on our own experience and our own life and what we see and what we play. Whereas, there's entire other worlds. This is like one of my rants that I will get up on my soapbox about is, we did the AMA a couple of weeks ago for Indies 12 Days. And there was a comment on our Reddit AMA, and the guy was angry at mobile gamers because, in his words, they don't respect the history of video games and they're ruining it for everybody by constantly making games be free to play. And I'm like, I'm not going to call you out on Reddit because I just really don't need that drama. But that is a flat out ignorant statement. I mean, that is, that's like saying, well, you can't enjoy a movie because you haven't watched Charlie Chaplin and all of the movies from the 1910s up through the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Getting more people into this industry is a wonderful thing, whether they come in through, a free-to-play mobile game, or they come in through Fortnite. Eventually that person is going to grow tired of that game. It happens to all of us. And then what are they going to do? They're going to look around for another one. They're going to try to find something else to play. And the more that we can expand our industry and, our reach and our player base, that's a wonderful thing, and this is one of the ways that you can absolutely do it.
Those mobile gamers, they just don't respect the history of gaming, so they're ruining it for everyone. That's kind of persnickety. You know what I mean? It is. But it also goes along the other thing, Jay. You can Google what you don't know, but you can't Google what you don't know, right?
That was a quote from Jen that I will
forever.
The other day, it was like,
yeah. So I'll say it's kind of general, just game design advice, because I really love game design. But you're talking about just playing games, getting in the game industry. Yeah, you want to play games and you want to play them very analytically, not really just to have fun. But actually, the best thing you can do for learning game design, which game accessibility is fully a part of, this really helps with learning how to design for game accessibility. Play bad games, because it's much easier to determine what's bad about a game than what's good about a game. And so you play all these bad games that just have horrible interfaces, and you're like, oh my god, I know how to never make an interface. And you will learn so much, I swear to God. That's one of the best things you can do, is just play a lot of really terrible games, see everything that's wrong with them, and write it down, and never do them.
That's actually very good advice. I generally say play a lot of games. You do need to play a lot of games, but you're right. You need to play a lot of bad games too. And that's not only for that, to find out what you do and don't like. In general, it's a good thing. So, Tyler, you just got another question. It says, players who can hear only one ear. Oh wait, that was just kudos for that. He says, is there a? This is why I suck at reading chat. Is there a good way to decide what's worth implementing and what people are already likely to be managing themselves?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, most of it is worth implementing. Like, for example, if you go back to the game accessibility guidelines, you look over them, I would say pretty much everything that's in the basic to intermediate categories, they're so simplistic to implement and so impactful that you really just should. Just the more the better. Which, I'm sorry, that's not a great answer. But that's another thing. You just have to talk to people. You have to play tests. You get in front of people and just ask your communities, ask your fan bases, what are you doing? And if you can, you want to handle as much of it as you can in game. Again, I'll go back to the controls. Like, Microsoft is making this controller. They did the Xbox One settings to work around bad developers, but that isn't a free ticket to be a bad developer. You should still let the controls be remappable in your game. You should let them this is a very high level thing that you don't have to do. But if you can do things like changing all of the analog inputs to just be optional, so they can use digital inputs instead, so that a binary 1 and 0 versus like a thumbstick. Huge deal for so many players. And that's the kind of thing people can't really do on their own. That's what the Microsoft controller is trying to do. I'm sorry, that's not a great answer, but that's a very difficult question.
But it's also one of those things. In one session and one talk online, is it going to solve everything? But it's one of those things where you can take a look at some of these articles and some of these guidelines, and don't, like a lot of development, don't try to reinvent the wheel. If someone's already figured out how to do something and it works, do that. Don't go and decide that your wheels need to have edges. Like points. The gaming accessibility guideline site actually has things broken down into basic, intermediate, and advanced, and count on their experience there. There are things that are easier to implement than other things, and they're going to affect a larger quantity of the populace. You look at some of these sites that we've linked, and we'll put them all up in the notes when we get the video on demand version of it ready. But go through it and look at what they've done, because they've already laid out a pretty good little I was gonna say a pretty good little checklist, and sure enough, there's a link right there that says Excel checklist download. So they actually literally have a link to it. I'll post that over there so it's in there.
Yeah, so the game accessibility guidelines, they're basic, intermediate, advanced categories. They're not actually just based on their difficulty to implement. It's also based on their impact. That the basic features are very simplistic to implement, but they're also very wide-reaching and can apply to pretty much any type of game, whereas the advanced ones are much more niche. But if you take a look at it, because it's such a good resource. It's not all-encompassing. Like in my talk, I mentioned quite a few things that Game Accessibility Guidelines doesn't go over, but it's still really good. And I would say really about half of the features that are in the advanced category are actually not that hard to implement if done at the beginning. If you try to do it at the end of a project, it's going to be impossible. But if you design your, put this in your game design doc, when you're planning something, when you're building a pitch, like, you should plan for these things in advance. It's honestly not that much work. It's like a day's work to do a really good job with this. But it's again, I'll just keep going back to it because it's the best advice you can give in any form of games, just any game design, UI. It's just playtest, more playtesting.
And remember as well, we've got our Discord set up now, or we've had it set up. But if you've got questions later on for Gunnar or for any of our guests, frankly, you can find all of them on there. There's a handy dandy little link that I just threw up in chat. Feel free to join, introduce yourself, ask away. That's what that whole server is for. We want to have an area where people can go and ask, questions. So there's that. But we've got to wrap it up here, partly because it is a snow day, and I have a 7-year-old running around.
Snow day, and he keeps queuing up on the mic. Dad.
Yeah,
are we gonna play some Fortnite, Dad?
do that or Minecraft, or the latest one was I want a smoothie. It's like great. We don't have yogurt or anything else to make the smoothie, so you're on your own.
Here's some beer and go to sleep.
There's already 3 inches of snow out there. Just go out there and grab some snow and some food coloring. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
So I'm in the indie game business Discord. I've been in there for months. Ask me anything you want in there. I write a lot of text, so I promise you I'll give you a very thorough answer once I can have a hot sec to collect myself and type it up. I type a lot very quickly. It's a problem. I also I just shared the link for the ITD Las Vegas Discord. That's obviously it's more centered around Vegas developers, but we're growing beyond that. We just started it, honestly, but we're very active in there. And so I gave the Game Accessibility talk last month, at the beginning, November 6th. And I just gave it again last week at UNLV. Had much better footage there. We had a whole AV team of 3 people, lights, 3 cameras. So that should get really good footage. I'm going to get that today. And so hopefully that version of the talk will be going up by the end of the week or so. And I'll share that on Indie Game Business, on everywhere else I can. So hopefully it'll look a lot better. And there, offline through Discord, actually, we were talking about a lot more specific things I didn't talk about, like facial blindness, which I briefly mentioned in the talk, but we really dug into it on Discord. If you have a question about something very specific on that, please just by all means.
Is that that's where you can't recognize someone's face, right?
Yeah, it's a facial prognosia. Not super niche condition, not something that will affect most games, right? But you can take steps to avoid it, not the difficulty. And the thing I bring up in the talk is imagine playing LA Noire with facial blindness, which is very dependent on your ability to distinguish faces and recognize emotions. People with autism, which I have very mild autism, they have difficulty recognizing faces as well. And so just using other cues, having options, just maybe have a name over that, or it's also kind of a character design issue. At that point, you want to have their clothing and other things be distinct and unique, so they're identifiable, unless you're in an Orwellian dystopia where everyone's in the same jumpsuit. But that's not common. Not everyone's making it stuff, right? So.
Awesome.
All right, so thank you, Gunnar. Thank you very much, man.
Yeah, thanks, Gunnar.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Like I said, it's something that's near and dear to our hearts, and so we're always, looking for ways to spread the word. Folks, we've got our Discord. Gunnar's we posted the link to the Las Vegas IGDA Discord chapter or Discord server as well. And then remember, for indie devs, this is something we've just started. We've renamed, still the same name, but we've relaunched the Indie Army, and we're building this as a means of promoting indie developers games. So it's not open to all streamers. It's open to developers who have their own dedicated Twitch channel. So if you're interested in being a part of that, send us a note, let us know. We will get you added, and we're just trying to increase a bit of visibility for all the studios out there. I think that is it from my. Did I forget anything?
No, you hit everything.
Awesome. Gunnar, thank you. Any parting words?
Yeah, just thank you so much for letting me in. Felt like no time at all, because I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. Yeah, if you want me to plug my stuff, the Discord, we'd love to see you there, regardless of where you are. Also, our IGDA Las Vegas YouTube. So yeah, we're having Valve over tonight, and then I'm having dinner with them later today, which I need to sleep for. And their talk is going to go on our YouTube channel, along with the newer version of my talk. And then in January, we actually have Christian Allen of Epic. He's coming down to Vegas just for us to give a talk. His talk will go on our YouTube channel. After that, we're trying to get Discord. So follow our YouTube channel.
And let us know when the talk with Tom goes live, because we'll obviously, we'll get you added to our library, and that way everything will be there for everyone as well.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome. All right. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful rest of the day.